A rocket strike on Israeli soldiers boosts calls for the government to take more aggressive action in Gaza. Will Israel now mount a large-scale ground operation? Well, with leaders facing a dilemma, what are their options? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Sami Zaidan. A rocket fired from Gaza has left dozens of Israeli soldiers injured, bringing fresh pressure on Israel's leaders to crack down on the territory. Well, the strike just across the border on an army base for new conscripts saw the biggest number of casualties yet from a rocket fired from the Gaza Strip. Islamic Jihad has claimed responsibility. Hamas, which took control of Gaza 3 months ago, called the strike a victory from God. It's prompted fresh calls within Israel for politicians to order tougher action against the frequent rocket attacks. And it comes just a day after Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert met Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, that of course ahead of US-sponsored peace talks in November. Well, Israel's government has been meeting to discuss the latest incident and has issued a warning to the attackers. It seems Israel could be considering cutting supplies of power, fuel and water to Gaza, measures rejected up until now. And it hasn't, of course, ruled out any military options. Well, joining us to discuss the Israeli government dilemma from Tel Aviv, Dr. Reuven Padazor, defense analyst for Haaretz and professor at Tel Aviv University. And from Gaza, strategist and analyst Hazim Abu Shanab. Welcome both to the show. If I could start with Mr. Padazor. The cabinet has been meeting. It's failed to come up with a plan for action. Is the Israeli government running out of options?
Not yet, but for the time being there is no decision, because after the cabinet meeting there is no public decision or public announcement about any operation. Unfortunately, we have several options. All of them are not so good.
Well, what are the options then? You said they're not running out of options, but they're not taking any decisions. What are the options?
The first option is of course the military operation, which is going to be a disaster for both sides. So for the time being, the government didn't decide on this kind of operation. Another option, that, as you mentioned, to cut supply to the Gaza Strip, which is again will be a disaster for the Gaza population.
So it doesn't sound like there are any easy or real options then, does it?
There is another option, and maybe the government will take this option. This option is going to be to declare Hamas as the Hamas bears the ultimate responsibility for these rocket launches, and the next time there will be a launching, the Israeli attack Hamas targets, not jihad targets and not other targets, but Hamas targets inside Gaza Strip. This is another option. There is no decision yet.
All right, let's go over to Hazim Abu Shanab. Do you think Palestinian armed groups, do they actually want to drag Israel back into Gaza? What's their strategy here?
Good evening for you and for the Israeli people. Today or in a few days they are going to start their new year. Happy New Year for the Israeli people. I don't think that the Palestinians, either Jihad, Hamas or any other party is trying to drag the Israelis again to Gaza. I believe that what's happening is something related to the Israeli show, which is played since a long time against the Palestinians to show their strength against the Palestinians. I think that there is a big problem for the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, that he inherited the previous Prime Minister with a weak playing on the ground, if we can say that. So because of his defeat in Lebanon, he is obliged to work severely against the Palestinians and others, so he can bring back the Israeli public opinion support for him. He's very weak, as Mahmoud Abbas, so he's trying to play the strong guy player in the playground. That's why he is acting gradually, severely against the Palestinians.
All right, well, let's look a little bit at the Palestinian side of this. Although Hamas praised the attack, they themselves have curtailed rocket attacks from Gaza by Hamas armed fighters. Does Hamas really want to see an escalation at this point?
I think everyone from the Palestinians is trying to retaliate for the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people, against the Palestinian targets, against the Palestinian land, everything. So I believe what they are saying in their statements, the written statements, are that they are retaliating for the Israeli actions against the Palestinians. But on the other hand, I believe that there is a kind of benefit for Hamas to have an outer enemy against the Palestinian people, so it can get back again, bringing the audience, the Palestinian audience, to support Hamas, because that she lost too much because of its attitude after the coup against the Palestinian legal authority.
All right, let's go over to Pedahzur once again. You talked about the possibility of targeting Hamas more. What possibly could Israel do to Hamas that it hasn't already done?
No, Israel didn't do this kind of operations until now, like, for example, to attack public buildings belongs to the Hamas. But let me illustrate the situation.
We've seen targeted attacks of Hamas officials, assassinations of Hamas officials in the past. They've had everything from sanctions to assassinations. Is there anything left in the book?
Yes, but for a long time Israel didn't do it. But let me illustrate the situation right now, because people around the world don't understand what's the situation right now. It's like if for the last 7 years rockets from San Diego would have been launched towards San Diego, from Tijuana towards San Diego. What the US administration would have done for 7 years, almost every day. So this is an impossible situation. The government of Israel has to do something. And it's a matter of luck. If, for example, a rocket will hit a kindergarten and 10 children will die, what will happen? Then it will be a disaster.
But is there any way for Israel to actually
stop? So it's not
stop
a retaliation of the Israeli actions, as my colleague said. It's not a retaliation. Let's remember that Israel withdrew from Gaza. There is no even one soldier in Gaza Strip, Israeli soldier. So what kind of retaliation is it?
All right, let's put that point to Mr. Abu Shanab. But Israel repeatedly says we've withdrawn from Gaza.
Something, if you don't mind, Mrs. Sami, I can talk about that. Of course, I don't agree on using any violence against any human. Although if it is a Palestinian or an Israeli or any human, I refuse that. But let's talk logically. What's happening today? We lost 4 persons, a family. A family was killed because an Israeli launching against this family over their building, their four levels building, and 4 died, 10 were injured. Previously, there were a whole family were killed a few months ago because of also an Israeli attack over 2 buildings in Beit Hanun in the same place. So we are talking about an Israeli attack, an Israeli aggression against the civilians in the Palestinian territories. So what's happening gives a big chance for Hamas, Jihad, Fatah, everyone, all the Palestinians to retaliate, to say that they are retaliating against the Israeli aggression. So that's why I say the greater power must stop its actions against the Palestinians, which is the weaker power, so they can oblige this weaker power to stop their retaliation against the greater power.
All right, let's perhaps shift gears a little bit and talk about the tactics being employed by Palestinian groups at this point in time. Was it a complete coincidence that they hit an army camp, that they hit caused such a large number of casualties, or is this an indication of changing tactics? What do you think, Mr. Abu Shanab?
I believe that it is a kind of incident. It's only an incident. I don't believe that the Palestinians are using rockets, in fact. They are using some some throwings against the Israelis. It's not so effective. This is the first time that we can hear about a target, an Israeli, a Palestinian launching with affection. So this is the first time. My personal point of view, I think that the Palestinians don't have that power or that kind of rockets. That's why I believe that's why the Israelis are trying to evaluate the situation in a different way, trying to test the Palestinian capability, Hamas, Jihad, and everyone. do they really have accurate rockets that we can say that they have rockets so they can launch against the Israelis, especially that the Israelis have that Ghost that Ahmadinejad did launch before a few months, saying that the first launching against Iran, there will be 600 targets will be hit in Israel. So they are trying to test how is the Palestinian territories are they with a hidden rockets can be launched against Israel or not. So that's why there is a big fuss happening towards what happened today. I mean, the Palestinian launching against the Israelis.
All right, those are interesting points there. Let's go over to Pedazur once again. With talk of perhaps regional tensions, regional implications to anything that happens in Gaza or the West Bank these days, and with elections on the minds of many Israelis, particularly Israeli politicians, how is all of that going to condition the way that Israeli politicians have to deal with this sort of situation?
After the war in Lebanon, which wasn't a great success, the Israeli politicians are very careful right now, and the reaction against the reaction to the rockets launching from Gaza will depend on the results of the launching, not on the election, not the coming Vinograd committee report and so on and so on. Only the results of the launching will be the main basis of the retaliation, which is ridiculous, because all of us, both sides, are waiting and waiting and waiting. It's a matter of luck. Maybe one rocket will hit, it will be a disaster. So to say that the Palestinians retaliate because they are the weak side, I agree, they are the weak side, but it doesn't justify to hit civilians for 7 years with thousands of rockets. It's not a retaliation.
All right, we'll have to leave the discussion momentarily there. It's time for a short break, but when we come back, we'll be looking at the wider issues for the region as well as the international view. Stay with us.